so I just hit the record button. So this session is going to be recorded so that we can share it on our member only portion of our TEEP website as a resource. My name is Jocelyn Long. I am past president of TEEP and here kind of as our TEEP representative, but we'll turn over the Zoom to Tyler and Ken, who are here to kind of talk about safety and the results of their safety survey and information. So it is all yours, Tyler and Ken.
Thanks, Jocelyn. And thank you everyone for taking time out of your night to spend more time on Zoom with us. I think what you'll enjoy from this presentation is you'll get a little bit different look than what's going to be in the TEEP article coming out later this month. You'll see some comparisons between Pennsylvania and the national averages, which you won't see in the TEEP article. And you'll see some recommendations that we provide that are a little bit more in depth than what we could include in the article. So I think it'll be very practical and hopefully helpful for you as you talk with your administrators and make plans for the future. So first of all, like I said, this is from the national data set, the state findings, and we have a web page that we've created. I have the link at the end. Jocelyn has the PowerPoint slides that will be provided with the recording so you can access these slides. But that data set will have links to other states on there as well. And then the article coming out in the TEEP journal, we just got the page proofs from Donna Painter. She did an awesome job with the layout, and that article will be coming out with some of this information as well. So my name's Tyler Love. I'm currently at Penn State Harrisburg. I served as the safety spotlight editor for ITA articles. I served with Ken on the National Science Teachers Safety Advisory Board. And I also am an authorized trainer for OSHA's general industry standards.
Good evening, everybody. And again, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy days, I'm sure, to take part in this, because I think it'll be very valuable for you. My name is Dr. Ken Roy. I'm on staff at Glastonbury Public Schools in Connecticut, and I serve as their Director of Environmental Health and Safety. I'm also their Chemical Hygiene Officer. I also have a private safety practice, National Safety Consultants. I'm a General Manager and Senior Safety Consultant. I am the Chief Science, Safety, Compliance Advisor and Blogger for the National Science Teaching, we changed the name, Association. I also am the Safety Compliance Officer for the National Science Education Leadership Association, and I'm a active member of the International Council of Association for Science Ed, which is worldwide. I've authored over 10 safety books, 800 plus and still counting professional journal articles on safety.
So basically, Ken doesn't sleep.
No life, no life.
So we're going to fly through, I'm going to fly through some of these background and literature slides. If you want more information about this, previous studies that have been done, they're in the TEEP article, but we have a lot of slides and we want to kind of get to the data and the recommendations. So thank you to any of those that took the survey in the spring. Your feedback was very valuable. So obviously with makerspaces and integrative STEM labs, there's more focus on liability, alternative certification, as we see less and less graduates in technology and engineering, and more alternative certification. Safety becomes another big issue, and after school clubs. So that's where a lot of this comes into play. Previous research, actually, Mark Threeton, and I don't know Avanosky's first name, but they're from Penn State University Park campus, did a study with CTE teachers, and there's some pretty good findings from that. One of the things that they looked at was what are some of the safety obstacles in place, and the things that teachers specified, Pennsylvania teachers specified from CTE, were things like lack of funding, special ed modifications, high class enrollment, and small classroom spaces. Most of the research in regard to safety in STEM labs, and this study here is cited within the PDE safety guide, comes out of Science Education. Stevenson et al. Did a study which is cited very thoroughly by NSTA and also in the PDE document. And this report really was a big finding in that it found that as class sizes increased beyond 24 students per one teacher, accident rates significantly increased. And as room size decreased below 60 square feet per student, accident rates also increased. So these were where a lot of these recommendations came from. But that study was done in 2003, and it was done within science education lab environments. So there's some crossover, but in regards to T&E, there's not been a lot of data collected on this. In regards to our standards, if you've looked at the STEL recently, safety is embedded throughout. Ken and I were on a panel that did a safety spotlight article that looked at safety, the focus of safety on different standards documents. And STL actually did a really nice job of focusing on safety throughout. So it's not just one standalone standard, but it's across various context areas and standards within that document. And the PDE document that hopefully goes out for public comment soon. If you've seen that on PDE's website, you can see the draft. That also has a strong focus on safety. So that's good for those of you that are looking at the standards and making curriculum updates, to go to your administration or your curriculum director at your school and say, this is why safety is an important focus, because it's in our standards and we make sure our curriculum aligns with those standards.
Teenie 2020 National Safety Survey. 718 responses from 42 states, really good. Interesting, 67 of those are from PA. Congratulations, nice. Seriously, obviously you take safety seriously. This is great. There were questions on info demographics, experience and certification, classroom conditions, T&E facilities, teacher and student safety training, and recent incidents and accidents. So we're going to touch upon those. Demographics, the first one. Now what you're going to see on these slides, we extracted Pennsylvania out of the national, but we gave you the thumbnail sketch here in each one of these. You'll notice in Pennsylvania, we have, 84% male dominance. I'm glad to see there are a number of females here tonight. Yes, good. All right. Also Caucasian white, 97%. Again, interesting. National average, 74%, 90% white, 5% black. Certifications. I guess the good news is almost 3/4 Pennsylvania have tech ed or T&E education. That's good. And others, 14. We're not sure. I'm not sure at least what those others are, but you do find some science there. What's interesting with the advent of STEM, you're going to find more and more administrators will take a science educator and throw them into the tech and engineering piece. I mean, I've seen science teachers thrown in, administrators will go, well, you must have ran machines when you were a kid with your dad in the garage, so I'm sure you know how to operate the machine. That's a real deal. That's what I hear. I mean, it's just craziness, just craziness. You guys need to be a big piece of STEM, not just science. Anyways, nationally, very similar profile.
In terms of total years of teaching, either tech and engineering, tech ed, or industrial arts, we left it as one category. Most of the participants in Pennsylvania were that 16 to 25 year of experience category. Nationally, that was also the biggest category at 16 to 25 years. Grade level taught, the majority of participants in Pennsylvania were in that middle school and high school level.
Courses and enrollment, course prep. You'll notice, very interesting, 1/4, and it's nationally, and you reflect the national statistic for preparations. And what's even more concerning to me, at least, preps 5 and then over 5 preps. Seriously? I mean, come on. This is very revealing. So there's good news and bad news here. But again, Pennsylvania seems to be, again, right on that national average out there.
And these were course preps per semester.
Yeah.
One of the other questions we asked was, what was the focus of the courses that you taught? People could select up to 3 options. And Pennsylvania was pretty similar to a national, but in regard to electronics program robotics, that was actually number 4 for Pennsylvania, even though it's not shown there. Nationally, that was a tie for second greatest focus. And pre-engineering was something that had more of a focus at the national level, things like Project Lead the Way, as opposed to in Pennsylvania, more tech literacy, engineering design, and materials processing, specifically woods. Whereas at national level, materials processing, we saw a good mix of woods and metals. This is where it starts to get interesting. So we asked, what was the average enrollment in your classes? And again, this study was done right around when COVID hit. So teachers had a whole year to reflect on this before COVID. And in-person instruction. So the average class size, and then we asked them your largest class size. So on average, Pennsylvania did pretty well. They said 53% of the teachers said they had about 16 to 20 students in their class. Another about 20% said 21 to 24. So that's pretty good. Nationally, that number was a little higher. On average, teachers said that they had a lot more teachers were in that 25 to 30 category. In terms of the largest class size nationally, these were much higher than Pennsylvania. So I know in PDE's recommendations, they say that they recommend that schools follow the 24 and below threshold set by the NSTA study. And it looks like Pennsylvania has done a better job than the national statistics following those lower class sizes.
Can I just interject here? It is very interesting. There's something called, which I'm sure you're aware of, something called occupancy load. All right. And this is by the NFPA. This is by the fire people. And there are specific occupancy loads in tech ed engineering labs, tech labs, science labs, et cetera, et cetera. The whole idea is that if there's an accident involving fire or something, they want everybody to get out alive. Yeah, well, that's a good idea. Administrators very often are clueless when it comes to this. They just think you just put more bodies in, more bodies in, more bodies in. And it's very definitive as to exactly how many. I'm not talking about class size. I'm talking about total occupants. That includes the teacher. If you have special ed paraprofessionals in there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's something certainly to be looked into, is the fire code. And remember, the fire marshal is your friend. The fire marshal in most states has jurisdiction over the superintendent of schools. Don't forget that fact. Sorry. Percentage of students in your class this past year that had special needs. Again, the yellow piece, 6 to 15%. 45%. If you look down at the national, almost mirror image. Administrative and district support. Administrative progressive disciplinary support. This in Pennsylvania actually reflected, relatively speaking to the national, very well on the, not very well, good, we'll say, on the administration. In other words, that they are actually supporting progressive disciplinary issues. You have a student that is putting you as the teacher, as an employee, all right, in an unsafe working environment. That administrator better do something about it, because under OSHA standards, that is the responsibility of the employer to make sure you are in a safe working environment. If you have a student in there that has unsafe behaviors in their life, they better do something about it.
And there's a safety spotlight article on this that came out last year that goes into more detail. We also asked teachers, do you feel like you have a sufficient budget to maintain safety and safety factors? In Pennsylvania, 64% felt that they did, whereas nationally it was almost 50-50. So budgets in Pennsylvania seem to be better than nationally.
All right, district safety practices. Interesting. Pennsylvania, PPE, personal protective equipment policy, 28% said yes. 20 a quarter approximately. 31% didn't even know. They were unsure. All right, excuse me, something as important as personal protection, because remember, who legally is responsible for PPE? It's the teacher assigned to that tech ed lab, all right? And if you're doing things in there and you don't have the appropriate PPE, something happens, you are going to be it legally. I do expert witness work, and trust me, I'm the one, unfortunately, has to go out because the parents hire me. I'm the one who has to go after the teacher and the Board of Education and the administration. It's just unbelievable. And I hate to say, the same thing is true here in science, in art, in other areas that are hands-on that require personal protective equipment. Chemical inventory, well, half, almost, yes, they have it. 28, you're unsure if you have a chemical inventory. You don't know what your hazardous chemicals are? Not good. Records of it, now this is decent. Almost 3/4 records of accidents. Very, very important, especially in a legal case where you need to protect yourself. You want to make sure that you have all the information relative to accidents.
We then asked, does your district conduct annual safety audits of your facilities for T&E? And 36% in Pennsylvania said no. Again, these were similar to the national. 25% were unsure if their district conducted audits. And then we also asked, do any of the following have a written safety policy? So in Pennsylvania, 81% said yes, they have a written policy for their T&E class. Then it dropped down to 55% for their department, and even less, only 28% for their district. So for consistency reasons, I know this is in our recommendations, Ken's going to talk about this in a minute, but having them at multiple levels to ensure consistency is important.
How does your district dispose of hazardous chemicals? Hopefully not down the drain. Oh, wait a minute, in Pennsylvania, yeah, they do 8% down the drain. All right, well, where's it going to go when it goes down the drain? If you're in the rural and you have septic, bad news for the bacteria in that septic tank. All right, not good. 31% are unsure. Excuse me, you don't know. And again, I don't necessarily blame the teacher, though they have responsibility. There's also the administration certainly has their amount of responsibility there. And again, relatively speaking, it's fairly much the same. SAVE in Pennsylvania, hazardous waste contractors, 45%. Good. Nationally, not so good, which makes me wonder if the stuff is floating down the river. Okay, recommendations. Now, as we looked at the study and the results and hearing from people out there in the trenches, which is absolutely critical, which to me gives this credibility. Number one, this isn't hearsay. These are people like yourselves that are out there in the trenches. You know what's going on. It's not hearsay. All right. Work with your district safety compliance officer, legal counsel, fire marshal, administrators, supervisors, and teachers to develop a safety program. Key. And this is an OSHA requirement to begin with. All right. We're not fabricating this stuff. You have to have it, including protocols, inspections, training, etc. Work with your board of ed. You're the one that are the experts. You're the specialists. All right. It's rare that you have a board of education member, and you might, but it's rare that they know much about your what you do, what you teach, what the kids are learning. So you need to teach them what's going on. Help develop a safety policy. Ask a district chemical hygiene officer or a safety officer, whichever you happen to have, how to properly dispose of the chemicals. How am I going to get rid of them? And by the way, before you purchase any chemicals, you need to know how you're going to get rid of them. All right, because it may be extremely cost prohibitive to get rid of some of these chemicals. I mean, we're talking thousands of dollars just to get rid of 454 grams or a pound of it, in other words. Unbelievable what it's gone up to. Refer to legal resources. OSHA obviously is a legal resource. The NFPA is a legal, EPA is another one. There are a number in state-wise and locally, there are also legal resources. And professional, better professional practice organizations, resources, ITEEA, NSTA for additional information in developing safety programs. Enforce consistency and fairly. Safety training.
So this is, these are some important slides because when we get to the correlations and and some of the logistic regressions that we ran at the end, looking at what contributed to accidents, you're going to see some of this information again. So we asked teachers, did you take an undergraduate tech or engineering lab course? So this is not a teaching course. This is your technical course. Then we asked, did you take an undergrad teaching methods course that talked about safety? Then we asked the same thing for graduate, a technical or lab course. And then did they take a graduate teaching methods course that mentioned safety? So Pennsylvania, better than the national statistics undergrad wise, graduate wise, nationally, we're a little better. So looking at this, ideally we would want 100% in that undergrad teaching methods course discussing safety topics. And this isn't saying that Cal U and Millersville aren't teaching safety in their courses, because this could be teachers that graduated from any program or teachers that don't remember the safety items that were taught in those courses. But that should be hopefully at 100% if someone's going through a teacher ed program in tech ed. And then we also asked, when you're initially hired, did your district provide safety training? And 91% of the respondents in Pennsylvania said no, they had no training when initially hired from their district, which nationally was much better at 60 or 32% they did.
How long has it been since your district last offered you safety training? All right. Now we're looking 6 months to a year. Pennsylvania, 7% as opposed to nationally 21%. Never received training from my district. Pennsylvania, 67%. Seriously? That's an absolute responsibility of the employer, the Board of Education, that they provide you safety training. And it varies the reasons, but normally if you have any chemical area, if you have any new chemicals you're dealing with, any new machinery, guarding, there's a whole slew of things. Basically it comes down to almost an annual event. That's the bottom line. And if they're really covering their butts, that's what they're going to do. If they're hanging themselves out there with this number of 67% in Pennsylvania, that's really unfortunate.
Then we also asked, based on the training that they received, did it mention any of these items and to what extent? So the one thing that became apparent was that there was not a great focus in these safety trainings on dealing with unsafe and behavioral issues. And that was one thing that teachers expressed, if you remember in the prior studies, that was one thing that teachers felt was very important and contributed to safety incidents was unsafe behavior by students and behavioral issues. So when we're looking at creating safety training and coursework around safety, that classroom management piece and how to deal with student issues is important.
Have you participated in any T&E safety training provided by someone other than your district within the last 12 months? Pennsylvania said yes, 7%. No, 93%. Nationally, 18% said yes. Who delivered the safety training you attended in the past 12 months? Right. Local training source, not my school district. 0 in PA, 26 nationally. State Teachers Association, all right, kudos to the State Teachers Association, obviously, at least 20%, almost double the national standard. All the rest are 0, other is 80%. So I tip my hat to the Teachers Association. Recommendations, according to OSHA, safety training must be administered upon initial hire. When you walk through the door, within the first few weeks, you should have received safety training on the area of your assignment. Again, anytime a new hazard is introduced, as I mentioned before, chemical, equipment, any changes, in other words, that are hazardous, potentially hazardous with risk to either you or the student, right? Or change in teaching assignment. Yeah. In other words, if I'm teaching metals one semester and I go into woods another semester, all right, that's a change in teaching assignment, right? Or any updates in the safety plan. Hopefully you have one, right? Under duty of care employer, the school, or the Board of Ed in this particular case, has the legal and professional responsibility to provide these training. Legal responsibility, legal. It is absolutely required, right? Employee can request in writing to receive these trainings. I would advocate to you, right, that you always, something like this, anything with safety, you always put it in writing, because administrators, I find in my work, tend to have short memories. All right. All of a sudden they develop dementia. Oh, I don't remember us ever talking about the safety issues that you had in your tech ed lab. I don't recall that. All right. I'm quoting. All right. So it's good to put it in writing and when at all possible, and keep it. Don't lose that piece of information. Facility. Sure.
A real quick question as far as those trainings are concerned. Where would and it may be late in your presentation, but like as a curriculum leader for my department, is like, where do we find resources for those trainings? Like if I bring a new teacher into my department, am I the one going over that? Is it the principal's responsibility? Like, are there standard courses? Because again, I think we're assuming that if our teachers are coming from Millersville or Cal U or from TCNJ within the field of tech ed, that they're coming in with that training. So any suggestions?
That is pre-service you're talking about, I believe.
Yeah.
We're talking, this is in service. In other words, once they graduate and you hire them, they are now your responsibility. So it's up to the school district to provide. Now, you can do a survey of your new staff. That might be helpful. It also depends on the policy of the Board of Education, whose responsibility. Ultimately, it is the Board of Education and the administration through the board, whatever their policies are. I would first check exactly what does the policy of the Board of Education say about training of your staff. All right, that's an important piece. Then who's doing it? It can be in-house if you have that expertise and you find out what is needed. Maybe you need, again, training on some, I don't know, machine, I'll just make this a machine guarding and PPE. Just making it up, all right? Well, obviously, if you have an experienced teacher that knows their stuff, been at safety seminars, whatever, they might be a viable candidate to do the training. If not, you might want to go to your either state, national or international association. They can, in fact, probably provide you with the resources you need. The internet is a great place. You can find consultants. I mean, and I'm not pushing for me to do that either, but I'm just saying National Safety Consultant, this is what I do. I do it for school districts. They hire me to come in to do the training of individuals. I also do inspections and the like, but this isn't about me. I'm just telling you, these are your options. And there are a lot of them out there. Good question.
Now, if I were to do the training, am I legally then responsible if something happens? I don't know
if the curriculum director, let me tell you something, how it works. It starts with the teacher and it goes up the food chain. You're in the food chain. I hate to tell you.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So what you want to do, first of all, is to check with your business office and see what your liability insurance is through the school district. Very important. How are you covered should either an employee and or a student get hurt on the job? All right. You need to find that out. If it's not million plus, you need to get your own insurance. All right. Professional liability insurance, because you just don't know. But again, I hate to tell you, but you're in the food chain. They're going to go, when my expert witness work, I go right up through a total supervisor, the administration, I go right to the Board of Education. They're all in there. And I determine if, in fact, are they negligent or even worse, are they reckless? In other words, they knew and they did nothing about it. A lot of these boards of education, they have all these policies. The administration never enforces it. So who's it? They are.
I saw in the chat, someone asked, so in Pennsylvania, Department of Labor and Industry, Bill Bertram was really good at explaining this. Department of Labor and Industry oversees our OSHA regulations. So there's some that are Pennsylvania specific where they add in more criteria, but usually by default, they refer back to the national OSHA, the federal standards.
So they have a state plan is what you're saying.
Yeah, so
Right.
if you read, like in the article, we talk about this, a TEEP article coming out, public schools would fall under that Department of Labor and Industry standard. Private schools would fall directly under the federal OSHA. But if you go to the Department of Labor and Industry site, you'll see that it specifically says in there public schools fall underneath that labor and industry, which then refers back to OSHA.
Definitely. Okay, we good? Okay. Facility characteristics.
So we asked, what type of room did you primarily conduct teeny activities within the past year? A lot of teachers, the majority said within a classroom lab combo, not as many as I expected to see within a dedicated just tech and engineering lab. And then, so pretty similar to national. We also asked, what is the approximate size of your instructional area? So this is where I took, remember we looked before at what was the average enrollment. So if you compare how many square feet their room is or their lab is compared to what they said their average enrollment is, it's a good comparison. So we had about 24% that said they had room sizes that would be able to hold 20 to 24 students based on the square footage. And we had 14% in the enrollment question that said they had more than 24 students. So looking at these numbers, Pennsylvania actually did much better than the national in terms of the square footage of their lab and the enrollment that they had for those spaces.
Just remember on the occupancy load by the fire code, all right? It's 50 square, this is what the code of 50 square feet net per occupant. In other words, you take the length times the width or whatever the perimeter is, and you have to subtract out any furniture, workbenches, filing cabinets, whatever it is. You subtract all that out. And what you're left with, then you divide it by 50. And that tells you what the occupancy is for that under the fire code. Soldering ventilation. And here under external vented fume hood, nice, 14%. Under internal fume extractor, even nicer. Do soldering activities, 52. A lot of soldering going on nationally, and you can see these are relatively very close. But again, you want to make sure you have good ventilation. That is, so people are not going to be breathing in those fumes in particulate.
So the first question we asked was, do you do soldering activities? And if they said yes, then it prompted them to answer those bottom two questions. So these are the numbers from that 52%. 3D printer ventilation. We asked, do you have a 3D printer? Do you use it? And then we asked what type of ventilation they use. 77% of teachers said they do not use ventilation. If you look at Georgia Tech had a study last year. University of Florida has a really good study and a policy for all their 3D printers on campus. Penn State has one. But anytime we're using 3D printers, we have to make sure there's some sort of ventilation depending on the type of printing material we're using and the number of printers in that space. So if you look at the studies, they found that there are ultrafine particles put off from various print materials. And so for students, it's not as big of an issue, but for the instructor, when you're breathing it in all day in that room, it now becomes more of an issue.
And on what Tyler is saying, remember, the kids come and go. The teacher, you stay. All day long, you're breathing that stuff in. You don't think that that's harmful to your health? Absolutely it is.
Laser engravers. This was kind of interesting that 3 to 5% had no ventilation for their laser engraver, because we specifically asked if they had internal exhaust system or an external exhaust for the CO2. So I'm not really sure what to say about the 3 to 5% that aren't using ventilation.
Maybe they're on respirators. Recommendations. Fire code, the NFPA 101, the life safety code, that's the name of this, the standard, requires, as I mentioned before, 50 square feet per student. It's actually 50 square feet per occupant, net square footage in academic labs and shops. Research suggests a minimum of 60 square feet. Again, the research shows it's even better at 60 square feet. conduct a minimum annual safety inspections to make sure your facility has the proper safety controls and space. All right, very important. You can check the ITEEA website and NIOSH. It's excellent checklists to do this. Make sure the instructional space meets all OSHA, NFPA, and other legal safety standards and better professional practices like the ANSI, ISEA, ITEEA, etc. Make it safer. Again, not safe. You can never make it safe, but you can make it safer by doing this. All right. You still can have accidents, but you want to make it safer for the teacher and the student, all the occupants. Use non-lead based solder. Yeah. What's I find very interesting in the regulations and laws, it says lead free. Does that mean it's lead free? Absolutely not. All right. They're allowed to have a small percentage of lead in lead free. I don't know. I don't make the law. I'm just telling you the way it is. So you might want to check about that. A good resource is down here at the bottom of that website. Classroom management safety practices.
So we asked a series of questions regarding different things that teachers do in regard to safety. So we asked, do you have students and a parent guardian sign a safety acknowledgement form before using any hazardous equipment? So these were the 4 categories. The number at the top is Pennsylvania. The number underneath it is the US average. So only 64% of Pennsylvanians that took the survey said that they require a safety acknowledgement form signed before they have students conducting hazardous activities. Should be 100% across the board there. In terms of testing students before they use hazardous equipment, only 79% in Pennsylvania said that they always require testing. Demonstrations are there. We asked, do you include safety questions on your quizzes and exams that you give? About half of the respondents said that they do. And then we said, do you provide both a written and oral safety presentation to students so that they have multiple ways of learning it? And only 24% in Pennsylvania said they always do, 12% said usually. So again, for different learning types, that could be helpful.
Remember also for, well, can you just go back there for a minute? Okay. Remember this, all right? This is part of your legal defense, all right? That you actually did training before they picked up a hammer, they used a saw, any power tool, whatever. All right, you always want to got to cover your butt. You want to make sure that kids have had the training, they got it in writing, they've got a form, they're signing it. All right, this is not a contract. All right, these are kids that are below the age of majority, but you can have them sign, it's legally binding, the safety acknowledgement form. You really need to make sure you do that. And you hold on to this stuff, I would say at least 5+ years. I don't know if in the age of majority or what it is in Pennsylvania, and it varies from state to state when they can turn around and sue you. Sometimes it doesn't start until they reach the age of majority. In other places, it can be 2 or 3 years after the time at which it happened. So if it happened in middle school, 7th grade, it might be grade 8, grade 9, even grade 10, the lawyer may come up to you in your classroom one day and hand you your papers, you're being sued. Right? I'm not trying to scare anybody here, believe me. I'm just trying to advise you, you want to make sure that your kids totally are into safety, they've had the training, and you've also tested them to make sure that they're on top of this. And also have the parents sign that safety acknowledgement form, very important piece. I'm sorry, go ahead.
We also asked things like, how often do you have students secure long hair or tie long hair back, remove loose jewelry, roll up long sleeves, secure baggy clothing, wear closed-toed shoes? Again, these numbers were kind of disappointing because these should be pretty standard practice in a lab. Also, the one that really shocked us was wearing safety glasses when working with solids or wearing safety goggles when working with liquids. You know, PPE is a last line of defense, but is one of the most important things that you can provide and legally have to provide. So 87% and 77% nationally was kind of disappointing to see in terms of just safety glasses as just one of the few minimum things that we can do.
Recommendations of all students be safety trained, tested, and sign a safety acknowledgement form, as I just noted, before starting any work involving hazards, hand, indoor power tools. Also need safety glasses with side shields, not just plain safety dollar store glasses, which are useless, I might add. All right, with side shields on an activity is being conducted in a room or a lab, and also indirectly vented chemical splash guards for any liquid hazard. Any liquid hazard. Students should be directly supervised when using any equipment after meeting all criteria. And you got to be very careful here. I've been in situations and lawsuits where the teacher has kids running power tools, even in middle school, and the teacher's the other side of the lab, his or her back to the students, looking something on Facebook. Who's it legally? Teacher. No direct supervision. That's just crazy. That's crazy. Include some key safety questions on unit tests. Make sure that safety is always on the radar. Every time you give a quiz or a test, all right, make sure you have at least one safety question, part of your defense. It's always on the radar. Real important thing to do. Provide written and oral forms of safety instruction and reminders. No open-toed shoes or flip-flops during lab activities. I can't say this enough. You'd be surprised. I do mock OSHA inspections. I'll go in the lab. The kids are fine. The teacher comes from behind the desk in flip-flops. All right. I saw this in a construction lab not too long ago. Flip-flops. I mean, come on. Anyways, always require students to tie back long hair and secure loose clothing and jewelry.
And that's a real picture, by the way, that teacher
Yes.
sent to us. That was from a group of students that were doing some work on a theater set for a school.
Safety tests and posters used with students. Again, you keep it alive. You don't let the safety die. All right. ITEEA safety website, Pennsylvania 7%, national 10%. And you just go right down. Actually, there's somewhat similar, a few little changes percent-wise, but basically about the same as national. Safety tests and posters are really good. Again, great for your defense. In other words, it's in front, visually, it's in front of the kids' eyes every time they're in there.
So there's a lot of information in here. This is in the TEEP article. So I'm going to kind of go through this pretty quickly because you can see it in the TEEP article, or the website link that we provide has the full data results from the state. But we asked a bunch of questions about their lab. And so one of the questions was, do you have safety zones on the floor around hazardous equipment to let students see where the safety zone is and where they shouldn't be when the machine is operating unless they're the person using that piece of equipment? Only 37% said that they had that. Not a real expensive investment to get a roll of that black and yellow tape and put those safety zones down. Also good for your defense, like Ken said. Non-skid strips near machines. One of the things I'll add is that when we did this presentation for ITA, we just looked at national. And when we looked at the national, we actually pulled out results just for, out of 718 people, 448, I think it was, said that they taught materials processing, tech literacy and design class, and construction. We pulled out some of the courses that we deemed to be more hazardous. So we like CAD courses, we did not include those in this side analysis that we did. And when we took the courses that we saw were traditionally more hazardous, the numbers weren't much better. So that was kind of concerning to us, in that in those courses with more hazards, there still were not a huge emphasis on safety zones, non-skid strips, eye wash is needed. The list goes on and on. Sorry. Whoops. So again, the numbers here not real promising, but hopefully we can provide some recommendations.
You know, can just go back real quick. I know we're short on time, but again, if a student gets hurt, gets splashed, and can't get to that eye wash, when they come and if you get sued, they're going to have their lawyers, they're going to have somebody come in, like me, it's going to come in, and I'm going to measure, I'm going to determine if in fact there was a 10-second accident. And if there wasn't, all right, you got trouble, because you're the one that's licensed. You're the one that's supposed to know better through your training. And this what brings in the school if they haven't done the training. Very, very important. Same thing with the safety zones on the floor. All right. though it can be a lot of trip fall hazards, slip hazards, et cetera, et cetera. There should only be one person working at that machine at a time. And there needs to be that zone of safety for them. So these are all possibilities you got to be thinking about should somebody get hurt. Go ahead, sorry.
Again, more questions. The one here that really stuck out to me was the Z87.1 safety glasses for the entire class. So only 88% of respondents in Pennsylvania, even worse nationally, 83%, said that they have enough safety glasses for every student that's in their class to have a pair on at the time. That should be 100%.
Yes.
First aid kits, only about half. I know in some districts, they don't want teachers having first aid kits. They want the nurse to take care of all first aid issues, but having some minimum first aid materials so that you can stop bleeding or something in the event of emergency is critical. We also looked at have any of the following occurred. So nationally, what occurred more than in Pennsylvania was that schools nationally restocked the first aid kits more than Pennsylvania school districts. One of the things here that we looked at was, do you flush your eye wash every week for 2 or more minutes? In Pennsylvania, only 6 people out of 67 said, yes, we flush our eye wash at least 2 minutes once a week to make sure there's no brown water coming out that we don't want students to get in their eyes if they have to use it, right? So we looked at some of these things. We also, I'm going to keep moving here because we're getting short on time.
Recommendations, all right? Flush out emergency ice and showers once a week, 1 to 3 minutes. Check first aid kit each semester, restock. Use a UV goggle sanitizer and make sure there's a UV-C germicidal bulb in there, right? You want to be able to kill all the biologicals. Have at least 1 or more sinks running cold water and hot water sources, depending on class enrollment. Have lockable, secure finishing or chemical storage room and chemical storage cabinet to prevent student access, and have a lockable, secure tool cabinet to prevent student access when not in use instructionally.
I saw there's a question in the chat about why having a sink is a safety issue.
Well, it can be for several reasons. One is hygiene, all right? And again, this is an OSHA requirement, and you must have both cold and hot water, all right? You also may use it in case there's an issue with your eye wash, or you may not even have an eye wash, so you have to make sure you got access plumbed running water so you can constantly bathe the eyes in the water. And there may be other reasons, or maybe you're cleaning something off on a tool. Who knows? It could be a variety, but yes, you must have sinks, and you must have enough of them that meets the needs of the population that's in there. 1 sink for 20 students doesn't cut it. Recommendations: have appropriate tape or painted safety work zones in all machines. Absolutely. Have non-skid strips near machine. Absolutely. Have appropriate ventilation to accommodate particulate and aerosol hazards. Have a wood dust collection system with intake vent placement at the main source of the wood dust production. This is a hot button with OSHA. They come in and they see that big time fine. In fact, they can even close down your lab. And rightfully so. Remember, wood dust, carcinogenic, mutagenic, reproductive toxin, explosion hazard. Make sure you've got a wood dust collection system. If you don't use anything that produces wood dust. Have workspace accessible to wheelchair-bound students, obviously ADA requirements. Have every electrical receptacle, I don't care if it's near a sink or not, GFCI protected. Have easily accessible emergency power shutoff switches with signage. Have sufficient number of electrical receptacles to eliminate, please, extension cords. They're nothing but trouble. They can be hazard. They can smoke in the middle of the night. They'll heat up. You'll come back to ashes. Accidents. During the time of your employment, has your school district been involved in litigation? Litigation or settlement because of teeny laboratory accident. 11% Pennsylvania said yes. No, 73%. Well, that's good. 16%, you don't know? Nationally, not as good. Unsure, though. Pennsylvania shines with this, only 16%, 31% were nationally. In the last 12 months, how many T&E safety incidents, no injury, have occurred in classes? Right, in Pennsylvania, 1 to 10, 67%, whereas national, 60%. I think Pennsylvania gets the prize on that one.
We also looked at if an incident did occur, what did it involve? And so probably much different than our industrial arts days and prior parts of our field. But hot glue gun was the winner for #1 cause of safety incidents. Student operated equipment, 31%, followed by hand and power tools, followed by projectiles. So, and those were similar to the national results. We also asked how many T&E lab accidents occur within the past year. So we asked minor accidents, meaning things that required no major medical attention. Major accidents were things that might require stitches, call to a medical provider. So we asked about these minor accidents, major accidents. Minor accidents could be things like cuts, lacerations, things like that. 1 to 5 instances within the past year was the highest. 90% said no major accidents within the year. So that's pretty good. We also asked how many T&E accidents occur within the past 5 years. So looking at 5 years now. Compared to the US, Pennsylvania was 7% lower in 1 to 10 minor accidents that occurred over 5 years, but then they were 8% higher for the 21 to 30 minor accidents category. So although they were lower in 1 to 10, they were higher on the 21 to 30 incidences that occurred. And then in terms of major accidents, Pennsylvania had 10% more major accidents in that 1 to 10 occurrence category.
If an accident, minor or major, has occurred in your classes within the past 5 years, did it involve any of the following? Right? And you notice here burns, heat and chemical, ingestion of foreign, electrical shock, 51 there for cuts and lacerations. Also 50, you'll notice for students. Unfortunately, some teachers also, shouldn't say unfortunately, anybody getting hurt is unbelievable. But these results were very similar to national findings, mostly in cuts, lacerations, and burns to students.
From that, we asked what was the most commonly injured body part from those accidents, minor or major, and fingers or hands were the most commonly injured body part. National is very similar. We also asked of those accidents that occurred within the past 5 years, what was the most common tool or equipment that caused the injury? Again, hot glue guns were the major item, hand tools. And then in Pennsylvania, one of the big things that came out was X-Acto or utility knives or box cutters, cuts from that, whereas hand tools were more of a focus nationally.
Table saws. Have a table saw? 75% said yes, nationally 65%. Saw Stop brand, similar. Instructor only use, very interesting, a third almost. Student use with strict guidance, good, I'm glad to see that. Student use with teacher in the lab. Hopefully they're there all the time, but 38%, come on.
We also asked, similar to the study that we showed in the beginning by Mark Threeton, we asked what are the items that you think are the top factors for unsafe conditions in T&E labs. And Pennsylvania respondents, very similar to the national findings. Student failure to follow safety protocols was #1, overcrowding was #2, and classroom management or discipline issues were #3. Mirrored national findings, I also include the 4th and 5th in the national, which included percentage of students with disabilities and inadequate facilities. If you think about the study done by Threeton, these are almost identical to those same factors from CTE teachers.
Correlations and predictors of accidents.
So this is the big questions that we asked in this study, and this is where we could really kind of narrow down and look at some things within the data. So what we did, we worked with the other author on our paper. The TEEP article teaches our statistics courses at Penn State Harrisburg and has his PhD in quantitative methods from University of Pennsylvania. So I trust that these statistics are pretty solid. He ran a polychoric correlation test. Basically, it looks at different factors and how they relate. And you can look at multiple factors at the 0.05 level. And we found some contributing factors, and then we found some reducing factors. And I'll explain what those mean. So these contributing factors actually were found to increase the likelihood of an accident occurring. So when teachers responded on those questions and we looked at the number of accidents that they had, minor, major, we looked at different categories. These are the factors that teachers who had accidents, these factors were from teachers that had higher rates of accidents. So if they taught a course that was more hazardous or had greater risk, like I said, materials processing courses, construction classes, we looked at those more hazardous courses, and we took out like the CAD courses and the robotics, and we focused more on those traditional classes. We found that 24% were more likely to have a minor accident and 30% were more likely to have a major accident if they were teaching a more hazardous class. Other factors were if you did 25% or more hands-on instruction in your class, obviously more hands-on instruction, more room for things to go wrong. Not saying you shouldn't do hands-on, just saying that that's where that came from. Hybrid classroom labs had a higher rate of accidents than other types of facilities, which I thought was interesting, but those hybrid classrooms and labs had more accidents. And then if people had said they had a table saw, if they said they had independent student use on the table saw, then they had a higher rate of accidents than other people who had a table saw in their class, in their lab. Then from the polychoric correlations, we could also look at what we deem protective factors. So there's 2 slides of these, but essentially these were factors that were found to be correlated with lower accident rates. So hence we named them protective factors. So for example, if you had safety glasses for every student in your class, if you answered yes to that question, those teachers were 16% less likely to report a minor accident and 25% less likely to report having a major accident. Other things were dust collection connected directly to equipment, fire extinguishers within 25 feet. If your circuit breakers had tripped, you might look at this and wonder, well, isn't that a bad thing? But if the circuit breaker is tripped, it's preventing other issues electrically from occurring. So we found that resulted having GFCI outlets, lockable flammable cabinets, lockable tool storage cabinets, if they had those. If they said they had master shutoff switches, all those were found to be correlated with lower accident rates reported for those participants. Again, more protective factors we looked at. We found that if they had safety zones on the floor around equipment, if they had non-skid strips, if they used a saw stop as opposed to another type of table saw. These were all found to help reduce the rate of accidents that these teachers reported. If they had a finishing or chemical storage room that was separate from their lab or classroom, if they had appropriate gloves for all students when needed, appropriate aprons when needed, and if they had a sink in their lab or classroom, all these were found to help reduce the rate of accidents reported by those teachers. And then the last correlation test that we ran, Phil ran a logistic regression test where you can control for different variables. And so when you look at this, the first thing we looked at was, do undergraduate T&E methods courses make a difference in the rate of accidents that occur? The answer for that, just that factor alone, was no. So just because a student graduates from a program and has a T&E methods course with safety did not mean that they're going to have significantly less accidents. But when we looked at it and we said, okay, well, let's look at it more comprehensively. And so we said, if they had some sort of safety training in an undergrad course or a graduate course, and then if they also had training from their district upon initial hire, and if they also had training updates within the past 5 years. If they had all three of those factors, they had a statistically significant less chance of having an accident occur in their classroom. So, and then we thought, well, and in fact, actually we could narrow it down because you can look at the odds of these things called an odds ratio. And we found that 37% lower odds of having one or more accident if they had all three of those training experiences. So what does this mean? I'll tell you in a second. So we also looked at if they had comprehensive training, we said, okay, well, maybe teaching experience played into this. So we then controlled for years of teaching experience and looked at, does teaching experience contribute to this safety rate? And the answer is no, there was no difference between various years of teaching. So what this tells us is that it's important to have training for undergrads coming out in pre-service or teachers that are getting certification to have that training on safety in their coursework. But then it's also extremely important to have some sort of safety training from the district on their policies, and then also updates as they occur so that safety is continually part of the conversation and it's not something that people are forgetting or unaware of updates to this information. So again, it's not just on the undergrad institutions, it's not just on the districts, but it's a team effort by everyone.
Questions?
I do have a question. I appreciate all the information. It's great. It's eye-opening, but not necessarily surprising, just given what we see on the day-to-day. My question is, one of the things that we were trying to work towards in our district is we coincide closely with the local CTEs. And we were trying to figure out if we could align our safety at the high school level with like career and technology centers, and it keeps running aground. Do you know, is there any state initiative to kind of get these things lined up or consistent?
So I'm actually, or Ken and I are actually working on doing some follow-up work with this study with Mark Threeton up at Penn State main campus, and looking at things from kind of a CTE, tech ed kind of perspective. If you look at ACTE, they do have a safety document. The problem is it's very, very broad because they cover everything from health service fields to auto mechanics, so that they cover such a broad array of areas, cosmetology, that the safety plans with those programs are almost program specific. So I don't know, that'd be a good question to ask Brent Hutzel, if there's any sort of initiative to try to combine things. I know Ken and I have done work regarding NSTA and ITA to try to look at where engineering instruction within the next generation science standards and within the ITA standards, where the overlap is there, but there's still distinct areas. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I think there are specific areas, especially in regard to OSHA requirements, where those things would overlap. And I think it's definitely something, to work smarter, not harder, and try to combine resources where we can, especially if we're using similar equipment like belt sanders and things like that. Those sorts of policies and things I think should definitely have some overlap.
Yeah, I think anecdotally, one of the things that we've found locally within our district is just because the teachers aren't receiving district training, unfortunately, which is going to change. I'll say that after seeing all of this, is we all know one teacher teaches safety different than the next. And there's a lot of confusion for students when they come from middle school and are trained one way, then go to a wood class in high school and are trained a different way. One of the things we've been working on is trying to align our training within the district so that the kids get the same thing the whole way through. But it'd be nice to push that further out.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. You have to have continuity. All right. If you're telling the kids in the middle school, well, you do it this way, and then when you get to high school, oh, no, you do it this other way. That's a communications issue in your staff. And you need to have joint PD combining, working on safety documents, that you've got the continuity. Absolutely. Well, you hit right on the target.
And even beyond that, I taught in Maryland before this, and we were county-run school districts. So the IUs in Pennsylvania, it'd be nice to see the IUs kind of team up on some of this stuff, especially in maybe in tandem with PDE to try to make the most of the resources that we have. But hopefully, so the link here and the QR code are linked to the full data set from Pennsylvania. So if there's a few items we didn't talk about, like chemical storage rooms and things like that. If you want to see some of that, all that data is on that website. And the article from TEEP, there's a pre-press article there. Like I said, Donna sent me the page proofs today. It looks good. That should be coming out, I think, at the end of the month. So hopefully you can, Jeff, you can take this article or take some of these facts, and now you have some empirical evidence that you can present to your district or to your IU and say, hey, training makes a difference. How can we try to provide some district training or provide some sort of training for our teachers? Because, you know, here's the data. It shows that it does make a difference and help reduce accidents.
Jeff, make sure you put it in writing also to your supervisors and administrators. Take a look at this site. This is a very important information, and it's to make it safer for everybody. Not only physical harm and whatever, but also legal. And that goes right up that food chain, and they need to be aware of that because some of them, again, are just clueless about it.
Yeah, I think they'll be receptive for that, and that is a plan. So far, they've been pretty good. I just think there's a lot of, and I would say generally with school districts, people don't know. You know.
Yeah, no, you're right. And the other quick thing here is I've heard the mouths of administrators telling teachers, oh, I don't have enough safety goggles. Oh, don't worry. We got a really good held harmless law. When it comes to safety, you're not held harmless. Bad news. Connecticut, where I'm from, has one of the strongest held harmless. Well, really, I've been involved in lawsuits here in Connecticut against some school teachers and the like and administrators. And guess what? Totally overrides that held harmless law. Totally overrides it. When they're negligent, no, gone.
All right.
I don't understand. Safety glasses are cheap. I don't understand why that would be an issue. But anyway, my question, it has to do with OSHA. I've been around a long time. And when I first started teaching, I had an issue and I called OSHA directly about it because my district told me they didn't have to listen to OSHA. And so I contacted them and they told me that my district was correct, that OSHA, educational institutions did not fall under OSHA law. Now I'm talking, this was 27 years ago.
That's changed.
So my question is, when did it change? What year? When did school districts fall under having to required to fall under OSHA laws? Because my district still thinks they don't have to.
You got to be kidding me. Anyway, I know it was before 1990, definitively. I think it was sometime in the 80s that actually took place.
Oh, I was told no by OSHA in 1997.
No, that's absolutely falsehood because the OSHA laboratory standard came out in 1991 and teachers were under that standard. So I know definitively because that's how I became the chemical hygiene officer. We're required by OSHA that we had to follow through. We are under, they have to understand, they're under, your school district is under general industry standards for OSHA, general industry. So this goes back decades. I don't know. Are you in a private school?
No, public.
You're in public school, yeah. They have a rude awakening.
Wow. Thank you. I appreciate that information.
No problem.
So Joanne, I just put a link in the chat. If you look under general safety law,
Okay.
I think this is a link. It talks about schools in there, I'm pretty sure.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep, including, so if you look under the second paragraph of you go to that page under second paragraph, it says any political subdivision thereof, including school districts.
There you go.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Appreciate that so much. This has been wonderful, very valuable.
Do we have any other questions? We are past our hour, but that is okay.
And we get time and a half now, so that's good.
So,
Maybe not, maybe not.
anybody, any other questions?
We're good.
Oh, good information. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yes, thank you to Dr. Ken and Dr. Love, right?
Roy,
Uh,
but it's close.
Dr.
close.
Roy, and Tyler for coming out tonight and helping us again. For those of you that are TEEP, this was recorded, will be posted to our members only section for further reference, as well as the article will be out in our spring journal, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. That should be in your mailboxes. Thank you for attending, and I believe our next session was supposed to be on the standards. It is now postponed. For standards, we are looking for an alternative for our May session. Our June session will be with on career connections in technology and engineering classrooms, and our July session will be on 3D printing and kind of the newest, latest, greatest 3D printers. So those are up and coming. If you're interested in presenting, please reach out to me. I am now in charge of hosting these webinars. So, just let me know if you have some topic that you would like to see covered, and we'll try to get it covered. Have a wonderful night.
Excuse me, as far as the May one,